All right, gentlemen, can you take a seat, please? That's a strong one. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, and I guess we know what our 1 minute of silence is going to be dedicated to tomorrow. Thanks for everyone's prayers and being calm enough. And I'm familiar with Fran, and Fran had an episode, same kind of episode 2 weeks ago. That's how he fell and broke his leg. So he obviously needs further medical treatment. And to quote his brother, he's been a little bit of a hardhead. So he probably shouldn't have been here to begin with, but he looked like he was pretty stable when he left. So we'll keep him in our prayers. We'll keep the Diamond and Harkins families in our prayers, and we'll certainly dedicate our Malvern Minute tomorrow to him. I'd like to welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our guest speaker event. It's turned into rather an event that we look forward to over the last few years. And thank you for coming. Thank you for your attendance. I'd like to also welcome those on virtual, those who are Zooming in. Our guest speaker this evening is Frank Marx. But first, I'd like to introduce some of our guests. First of all, Father Doug, thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, thank you. Okay. That's it. We heard. Thank you, Father. Gave Fran a blessing. In true Father Doug form. Thank you, Father. I coached. I got to coach Father a little bit, but when he heard he had to do nothing but listen, he was he said yes right away. So thanks for coming. Yeah. Yeah. So when he comes in, I called you. Okay. Okay. Well, like I said, the guest speaker is Frank Marx, but I'd like to also introduce you to his lovely wife, Joanne, who joined him this evening. And boy, did we see a lot of the president of Malvern over this weekend, didn't we? But most importantly, we have the First Lady, Leslie Norton. So again, welcome, and sit back and relax. Frank Marx. What can I say a little bit about Frank Marx? Well, you know what? If you Google Frank, I don't believe he was ever a professional athlete. I don't think he was never a Hollywood movie star. There are no books written about him. He's not in the newspapers. You're really not going to find anything on him. You're not going to see him on TV. You know why? Because Frank Marx is one of us. He is us. And he is a man of Malvern. And if I may say so, you tell me if I'm accurate, Michael. If there's a definition of a true man of Malvern, the epitome of a man of Malvern, it's Frank Marx. A little bit about him. He was born, and he's a local boy like the rest of us. He was born and raised in Delaware County. Attended, where'd you go to grade school, Frank? St. Dorothy's in Drexel Hill, right? St. Dorothy's in Drexel Hill. St. Joe Prep grad, Fairfield University. Yeah. Okay. And he's been an insurance executive for his entire adult life. As far as Malvern Retreat House, Frank is a 50-year retreatant with the Our Lady of Fatima group, which comes, I believe, the second week in January. He is the recipient of the Distinguished Service Award. He is the recipient of Malvern Retreat House's John Ferrick Award. He is also the recipient of the highest award that Malvern bestows on anyone, and that is the William Lennox Award. Frank served 3 terms of 3 years on the board of directors, and I believe he's the longest serving ever chairman of the board of directors at Malvern Retreat House for 6 years. Okay. But folks, what makes Frank's story different, I mean, we've heard Kevin Riley, we've heard the Eisenbergs, we've heard a lot of very emotional stories, but what makes Frank's story different is the fact that he credits the Malvern Retreat House, St. Joseph's in the Hills, and St. Joseph in particular, with giving Frank the strength and the endurance to cope through multiple tragedies, unheard of tragedies. And he credits the Retreat House. So I don't think we have another guest speaker that's ever spoken at Malvern that can say that. Malvern Retreat House and the power of Malvern Retreat House is Frank Marx's story. Let me just say something on a personal level. After knowing what Frank has gone through in life, I don't want to embarrass him, but when we're out together, I don't so much as complain about the weather, if you know what I mean. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Frank Marx.
Good evening. I don't think I've ever gotten a finer introduction anywhere, Jim. God bless you. Thank you. He stole a couple of my lines, which is great. I'm glad he did. But I want to thank Jim, first of all, and Michael Norton for inviting me tonight. And also let you know how honored I am to be here. This is a great opportunity for me. And I just want you to know that. And I hope this has also been a good retreat so far. As Jim mentioned, I grew up in Delaware County and went to St. Dorothy's Parish. I'm one of 6 children, the only boy. My dad was a doctor, a specialist in internal medicine, and my mom was a homemaker until my youngest sister went to grade school, and she then went into the working world. If anybody here knows Drexel Hill, you might know Aronimink Swim Club, and that's where I grew up, behind Aronimink Swim Club. And it was a savior for me. Living in a house with 6 women, I needed to get out and get out early. And Aronimink Swim Club was just the perfect place. I could actually walk there, ride my bike, come in the back gate. I was very close to there. And in the summer, this is before basketball camps, we had the unbelievable, and we knew it was a gift, but we didn't know how important it was, to have 3 unbelievable men as our athletic directors at that swim club, because there was all kinds of facilities. There were 3 pools, basketball courts, tennis courts, soccer fields. We had Jack McKinney, we had Herbie McGee, and we had Jimmy Lynham, all working there for a number of years. And this is back in the 60s, 70s, as I said before, basketball camps. So we got to know them very well. And that was super. My parents' faith was very important and instilled a lot in our family. My dad was the hard worker, a dedicated doctor who, if you can believe it, had almost 1,000 patients. He treated about 50 nuns and priests during his career, and he did that for free because that was his way of giving back for the blessings he had in his life. And he had some tragedies in his life, but he overcame them and through God's love. He was also the doctor for Our Lady of Fatima for 35 years when we were on retreat here, until he passed away. 4 generations of our family have been part of Our Lady of Fatima. My grandfather, James Nolan Curley, came out here in the 30s and eventually was part of Our Lady of Fatima group. He had always invited my father, who I'll get into his career, but my father was a Navy doctor. He was in Korea, and he never got to Malvern until after my grandfather passed away. But once he got here in 1953, he came almost every year. Besides my grandfather and my father, I'm the 3rd generation. My 2 sons, Francis and Patrick, are 4th generation Our Lady of Fatima, and both of them have never missed a retreat. I can't say that I missed a few years when I was in college, but when my sons went off to college, they turned around the next week in January and came home to be here for the retreat, which I thought was awesome. As Jim mentioned, this past January was my 50th retreat here at Malvern, and I cannot begin to tell you what Malvern has meant to me. I came here first as a 17-year-old, so nervous that I couldn't remember some of my prayers. I knew before coming what a wonderful place this was because I had watched my father come home year after year, and he was a changed man when he came home that Sunday. I look forward to coming my first year and spending the weekend with my dad, because as I said, he was a workaholic. So if I wasn't caddying for him on Atlanta Country Club or coming on retreat, he worked 5 days a week, 3 nights a week. So he was a busy man. Thank you very much.
Hopefully they stay.
I won't touch it. So our retreat was the second week in January, and you might remember back in the 70s and the 80s, that happened to be the same weekend as the Super Bowl. So when we came home from retreat, and usually we get home around 1 o'clock, back then the Super Bowl was at 1:30. So you felt like you really got a special gift when you came home. And it was the only group I think could say that. I met my first wife, Maureen, in 1979 up in the Poconos. And we got married in August of 1981. God blessed us with 4 children, Frank, Lauren, Caitlin, and my son, Patrick. I can tell you that my life was very good. I had a loving family, a really great extended family, and a lot of good friends. I've worked in the insurance industry, as Jim mentioned, for the past 50 years for my grandfather's company. James Curley started Curley Adjustment in 1933 when he hawked his life insurance policy. He had, like a lot of people at that time, he lost his father young. He didn't even complete high school, but he got a job at an insurance company. He worked his way up, and he was the assistant to the chief of claims for Travelers Insurance Company when he decided, maybe I could start my own company. There were a few independent adjusting companies out there, and so he decided to do it, and he did it. And the company is 91 years old now, and we're not only around all that long, we're the oldest independent adjusting company right now in the country. I'm proud to say that. Headquartered right here in Philadelphia, by the way. Malvern Retreat House has been crucial in my faith development. And I think it's been a central pillar of my faith, along with my parents, the nuns and priests that I've known and educated me. We are given a gift of faith, I believe, at birth when we're baptized, but it's up to us through the sacraments and through education to grow that faith. The first time my faith was truly tested, and it hadn't been, I was living a charmed life. I was 37 years old, and I really hadn't lost anybody in my life. And on Saturday, January 5th, 1991, my parents were killed in an auto accident. They were on their way home from what was supposed to be a wonderful event. Eight doctors and their wives were getting together for a dinner party in Chester County at one of the homes that was a 18th century farmhouse. And I know they had a good time, but on the way home, unfortunately, it was an icy, snowy, horrible night. My father was only 64 years old and my mom was 66, and they were both in very good health. They had a couple of health scares a year or two earlier that had our attention, but both of them turned out not to be that serious. They both were daily communicants at Our Lady of, at Mary Magdalene Parish down the road here. And 2 years earlier had taken an amazing trip to Medjugorje, where they experienced the miracle of the sun. And, you know, my dad traveled a lot for medical conventions with my mom over the years, went to some wonderful places, but they said that trip to Medjugorje was by far the best trip they'd ever taken. And it changed their life. Upon hearing the news about my parents' death, I was in shock. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was pretty sure I wasn't going on retreat the next weekend because I just felt it was going to be too painful. So Sunday night, we had a pretty good snowstorm. And Monday morning, I get up early in a fog, went out to shovel the driveway, and something told me I needed to go to the mailbox. And I'm thinking, I don't need to go to the mailbox. I got the mail on Saturday. Why am I getting this urge to go over there? Anyway, I follow that little voice and I opened the mailbox and there's one piece of mail in there. And it was a retreat confirmation card. So I immediately knew I needed to go on retreat. Coming that weekend was a deeply healing experience for me, as you might expect. And one of the amazing things that happened was adoration. Our group, A Lady of Fatima, would go to adoration all night. We had about 300 guys on retreat normally. And we got 30 minutes for that retreat, adoration. So I got my adoration. It was probably like 2 a.m. And I went. After 30 minutes, nobody shows up. And I'm thrilled because I got my dad's next 30 minutes. And it was the first time, obviously, I attended a retreat in all those years without my dad. As you know, Malvern Retreat House has had a practice of face sharing on Sunday morning. And in 2001, January 2001, I met a high school classmate here with his brother who was on retreat. And when I met him, I could tell something was off. I didn't want to pry, but I could tell something was bothering him, and his demeanor did not change the entire weekend. So I didn't know what was up. And I hadn't seen him since we graduated St. Joe's Prep in 1972. So at face sharing on Sunday morning, he came up and stood here and told a story. He said that they expected that previous spring to be one of the greatest times of their life. He had 2 children graduating college. One was graduating from a school in Ohio, and his other son was graduating here at LaSalle. And he said on the way home from the Ohio graduation, they're driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and a deer comes across and comes through the windshield and kills his son, who was to graduate LaSalle that weekend. He also mentioned that just prior to this accident, he had pulled over at a rest stop when his son had asked his mom, "Can I sit up front with my dad for the rest of the trip?" He went on to say how faith had helped him cope with this tremendous loss. I was shocked to hear the news, as everybody in the room was shocked to hear that news. And I tried to imagine his pain and sorrow, and I just couldn't. Little did I know that I would come to understand that pain all too well. My oldest son, Frank, was summa cum laude at Fairfield University. And was chosen to be the valedictorian of his class in 2004. And Frank had said to me, 21 candidates qualified to be valedictorian, and they were all asked to submit speeches. And he sent me his speech to read. "Dad, please edit it. Please give me your thoughts." And I think I changed one word or suggested maybe one word. It was a beautiful speech. So he was fortunate enough to be one of the 5 finalists chosen to give that valedictorian address. And he was asked to get dressed up and come into the panel and make the presentation with the other 4 candidates. And they drew straws to see who would go first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And he drew the 5th straw. And he immediately thought, I don't want to go last. And then he said to himself, wait a minute, I'm Francis J. Marx V. What spot should I take? I should take fifth. And of course, he knocked it out of the park. He was chosen to be the valedictorian. And as I said, he was a fourth generation Lady of Fatima member and came on retreat when he was only 14. He had been bugging me, and I asked Father O'Donnell, I said, my oldest son would love to come, but he's a little young. And Father O'Donnell said, is he mature? I said, extremely mature. He was an eighth grader, but he was extremely mature. And he said, bring him, let him come, which of course he did, I did. He never missed a retreat until the time of his death. He loved Malvern so much that he included a part of Malvern in his valedictorian draft speech to the committee. The theme of his valedictorian speech was follow your heart. We must have compassion or heart for others and complement that with action by enthusiastically participating in the world events. Now is our opportunity to live out our education, promote positive change, and act in the world to make it a better place. He was killed 3 days before graduation, attending his girlfriend's spring formal in Newport, Rhode Island. They had a wonderful time. His friend told me that he was saying that night that was one of the greatest nights of his life. They were on their way back, walking down from the mansion to their hotel when they encountered a group of URI students who had been on a pub crawl since this is 1 o'clock in the morning, it was the previous noon, so noon the previous day. And words were exchanged because of the formal attire. Frank was with a group of well-dressed young men and women. And for some unexplained reason, a young lady, a very drunk URI student, came up and slapped Frank. He's standing with his girlfriend, hadn't said a word, and was slapped. And Frank, if you knew him, he was 6'3", he was extremely well-built, and he was extremely handsome. And maybe that's why she slapped him, I don't know. But he turned, he would never have done anything about it because he would never strike a woman. But her boyfriend was there, and as Frank turned towards her, shocked that he got slapped, he was pushed backwards. There was no intention of hurting him, but he was pushed backwards, he fell into the street. And ironically, the bus that was arriving to pick up the URI students, a yellow school bus, killed him. We were so looking forward to his graduation and know that for Maureen and I, it was going to be one of the greatest days of our life. Following his death, however, we just couldn't even think about going up to the graduation ceremony. Fairfield University contacted us on Saturday and said, we really like you to be here. It was going to be for Sunday, May 23rd. And I said to my wife, I'm going to go up and I want you to take the ride with me. She said, well, I'll take the ride with you, but I'm not going to go up and accept his diploma. I said, oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. We wanted to go there and decided to go there that Sunday to acknowledge his amazing accomplishments, accept his diploma, and congratulate his friends. We didn't expect anything in return and only hoped to get through that day. But that wasn't God's plan. However, we met some very special people that day, including Mother Dolores Hart, who was invited there to receive a Doctor of Laws degree. And she told us when she got the request in February to come and accept the degree, that she decided not to go. She was in a cloistered abbey in Bethlehem, Connecticut. She hadn't left there in 40 years, except to go to doctor's appointments. And something told her she needed to go. And when she met us, she told us, she said, now I know why God wanted me here. And meeting her that day really began our healing and gave us the strength to get through Frank's funeral the following week. In looking into the circumstances of our son's death, we, obviously went up to Rhode Island and we met with the Attorney General of Rhode Island, because one of the people involved, actually the person who actually pushed him, turned out to be the deputy police chief's son. So you can imagine this case wasn't going very far. He told us, and I quote, to just get over it and move on with your life. That's something you don't do with the loss of a child. Our family knew Malvern Retreat House had a great influence on Frank and helped him make him the person he was. He served as Eucharistic minister here at Malvern and at Fairfield University. He was captain of his crew team and volunteered helping out to educate underprivileged kids in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He helped tutor them, and he also worked at a women's shelter in Bridgeport. Frank's death tested my faith in a big way, and Malvern Retreat House was truly the crutch that helped me cope with and begin to forgive those involved in Frank's death. I already knew, just from life experience, that the loss of a child ends up in a divorce situation about 70% of the time. And I was just determined that would not happen to Maureen and I. We still had three small children at home, three younger children at home. And had I not had those children, I think what I probably would have done was flee somewhere. I just wanted to go somewhere, to get away, try to get away from the pain. But that wasn't going to happen. And I believe I know why so many marriages, in fact, do fail, having gone through this. It's such a devastating personal loss that not even a husband and wife can fully share. I believe it's only natural for a mother to say to the father, but you don't know what I'm going through. And him to respond, what are you talking about? I'm going through the same thing, but it is not the same thing. A mother carries a baby for 9 months, creates this incredible bond that a father can never have. And I want you to know that Frank was my firstborn, my best friend, and someone I was immensely proud of. We were both hurting tremendously, but we were hurting in different ways. Faith, if not accompanied by works, is dead. I believe we are all given a measure of faith at baptism, and it's up to us through religious education, the sacraments, and service to others to grow our faith. Following Frank's death, I wanted and needed to honor his life and preserve his memory. Our family started the Francis J. Marx Memorial Fund to help charities that we know that he would appreciate. Fairfield University, Men's Crew, Holy Ghost Prep Scholarship, Malvern Retreat House, Amigas de Jesus, and Catherine Drexel Grade School have been the main recipients of these funds. But we've also added about 15 other Christian charities that we support on a selective basis. In the past 20 years, we have raised well over $250,000, and 100% of that has gone to the charities. So as stated, the Memorial Fund was started to honor his memory, but it ended up, the result was it's put our faith into action. The loss of a child is something you never get over. However, with time and faith, we can learn to better deal with our loss. Maureen knew she could never get over this loss. And we both thought we probably would never be happy again, but we were going to go on with our life. She was extremely healthy, but this traumatic event took a toll on her immune system. And over time, cancer cells entered her brain and she ended up with seizures. So the diagnosis was a glio, which basically is a death sentence, unfortunately. And we lost her on April 8th, 2009. I still had two younger children at home, and I devoted myself to taking care of them and my work. It was several years later that my youngest son, Patrick, came to me and said, out of the blue, "Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again?" And I said, Patrick, I really don't know, but I would like to meet someone. And I honestly took that as his permission, and I think he was 14 at the time, that I could actually maybe try to meet someone. And it was only a short time later I should tell you that once he told me that, I decided to do what I'd done before I met my first wife, Maureen. I would start praying to the Blessed Mother because she answered my prayers the first time. And so I did. I started praying to my Blessed Mother. And several months later, a friend, John McHenry, who happens to be a man of Malvern, told me about Catholic Match. And I'd never heard of Catholic Match. He said, "What are you talking about? It's on the back of all the bulletins, church bulletins." I said, "I guess I don't read it." He said, "Well, you need to look into it." He told me a couple really great stories about his experiences and gave me the impetus to go on and fill out a profile. I met my present wife, Joanne, 2 months later on Catholic Match. We text back and forth for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet. And we met at Peddler's Village on December 30th, 2011. And I was running a little late, and she was waiting for me on a bench outside the Cock and Bull restaurant. And playing on the outside speakers of that restaurant, if you can believe it, was the Ave Maria. And you don't usually hear that outside. That was a nice sign for us. We both share a deep faith and have helped each other in that regard. We both took a leap of faith that neither one of us expected, and it was greatly helped by some of our dearly departed ones that put us together. We had both lost our spouses, and we're trying to figure out what the next chapter of our life looked like. As I got to know Joanne, she helped me gradually to find happiness. I felt sure I lost that forever when Frank was killed and Maureen passed away. She also helped me heal my broken heart. At that time, I lived in Richboro, Bucks County, and Joanne in Yardley. And one day, I discovered that the Blessed Mother statue from my front lawn was missing. Somebody had taken it, looked all over the property, couldn't find it. And I asked her, I said, I need to go buy another Blessed Mother statue. Would you mind going with me? She said, "Sure, I'll go." So we went to the St. Jude shop there in the Chamonix, looked around, and found what we thought was the perfect Blessed Mother statue. And as we're examining it, Joanne turned it over. And on the bottom were 3 initials, JMS, her initials. So I knew that the Blessed Mother was telling me I found the right person. When I chose Catholic Match, I did it for a reason. I wanted to find someone that shared my faith. And I found out, because there's a profile and there's information about each person, I found out that Joanne answered all 7 questions in the affirmative. So I thought that was pretty good. She did tell me later she wasn't 100% sure about question 6, the Pope's infallibility. My faith taught me the importance of forgiveness, and I forgave the tractor trailer driver that killed my parents and the URI students that pushed my son to his death. But I did that as much for myself as for them, because I realized through Malvern that harboring hatred, hostility, and contempt separate us from God's love and prevent us from getting some incredible messages from your departed loved ones. And that's what really was important to me. When a parent loses a child, there's one thing they want to find out. Is my child safe? Are they home? And these messages confirm that. And in my case, they confirmed it. I could do a whole talk on the wonderful messages I've received. So those messages don't happen without God's approval. Prayer has been an important part of my life and faith development from a very early age due to my father's influence. He lost his mother at 4 years old and his father when he was 12. He was the oldest of 3 children when his mother died. And his father didn't know what to do with him, so he put him in first grade. There wasn't any kindergarten back then. So my dad started first grade at 4 years old. Fortunately, he was a very smart young man. He showed me his report cards. They put me to shame. And he was accepted at Georgetown University pre-med program when he was only 16. He told me he was studying pre-med and he was enrolled in the Navy's ROTC program. And he said to me, Frank, one of my fondest memories as a young student was I got a chance to go to my first professional Eagles football game against the Washington Redskins at Old Griffith Stadium. And the date was December 7th, 1941. So he said, I'm sitting in the stands, and because of the difference in time, the news about Pearl Harbor didn't happen until well into the second quarter. He said, but by halftime, half the place was emptied out, obviously, because of all the military people that were there. Following his junior year at Georgetown, he was sent to Georgetown Medical School. They needed doctors very badly, the Navy, and he was doing very well in pre-med. He graduated medical school at an incredible age of 22, never having completed college. And as a matter of fact, his father kind of did the same thing. His father, during the First World War, he was at Canisius up in Buffalo in pre-med during the First World War, when they took him out after his junior year and put him in, I know this too, the medical school up in Buffalo. And he graduated. Obviously he wasn't in first grade at 4, but he was a young doctor as well. And he was an Army doctor. So my dad told us he flunked the medical boards the first time he took them. And obviously he was upset about that. And he prayed to the Blessed Mother very hard for assistance and promised her that if he passed his boards, he would say a rosary every day the rest of his life. Which that's a promise he kept. And as a result, we as a family prayed the rosary a lot. He was sent to Villanova on the V-12 program with the Navy. It's a leadership program for a 6-month course. And he met my mother, who was a student at Rosemont on a blind date. They got married. He ended up in Korea in a MASH unit. Ironically, working with the Army doctors, because the Army needed doctors worse than the Navy did. My mother and Aunt Pat were sent to the Visitation Academy in Frederick, Maryland as young teenagers because their mother had become ill. And my grandfather, Jim Curley's cousin, Sister Anna, helped run that school. My mother told us they loved the school and the nuns instilled in them the power of prayer. My mother told me that I would be faced with what seemed to be insurmountable problems in my life, and that when that happens, I needed to give it over to God. I've done that on numerous occasions and been rewarded for doing so. Joanne's mom, Mary, is turning 100 in a couple months. And although her body is failing her, her mind is sharp as ever. She is a very devout Catholic and has done more for my prayer life, I think, than anyone else in my life. As parents, we have a lot of responsibilities when we raise our kids. We want to keep them healthy. We want to keep them safe. We want to teach them values. We want to give them a good education. When I was talking to Mary about being a mother, she broke it down to one simple thing. She said, my only job as a parent is to get my children to heaven. And I thought that was beautiful. My sisters and I have 5 sisters, and we're all very close. They're all spread out all over the world. My sister Patty lives in Ireland. And we started a novena when the pandemic began. Each one of us taking 9 days and choosing whatever novena we wanted to. We started that in, I guess, March of 2020. And we're still continuing that today. And it's keeping us close as a family, and I think it's important to do that. Joanne and I pray often. We pray the rosary often. We're in the car, we'll pray the rosary. We know it helps our faith. I recently attended a meeting about faith and growing your faith, the benefit of small groups. And the speaker was Ron Wolf, who's also a man of Malvern. And Ron had a wonderful saying that I don't know if he came up with it or whatever, but I stole it from him. Your life can be substantially changed by the doors you are challenged to walk through. That is how I feel about Malvern Retreat House. It has substantially changed my life. And no matter how hard I try, I don't think I can ever repay what it's meant to me. And thank you, men, for also walking through these doors. I want to say a few words, if you don't mind, about the Good Shepherd Club. Some of you may be aware of it, some of you may not. It's something that's been started years ago to help Malvern into the future and have the men and women of Malvern remember Malvern in their estate planning or in their wills. If you love Malvern like I do, I want you to consider joining this club. This is our way of ensuring that Malvern will be here for future generations. Please join the club and help us leave something in your will. This operation cost well over $4 million to run, and the retreats we have here just don't cover that cost. And that's why development is so important. And we raise funds to basically cover our cost, but we need to start building our endowment. When you joined the Good Shepherd Club, you get a really nice pin. But also, you know you're helping this place be here for years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I do. Thank you. I would like to take a few questions, but before I do that, Jim mentioned that I served as chairman for 6 years. I want to tell you a little bit about that. I loved coming to Malvern. I loved sitting where you're sitting, and I liked listening to the face sharing. And all those years, I think I might have gotten up once. I was content staying where you were. I was content being here, and I was also content helping Malvern. And Jim Fitzsimmons asked me one summer, would I be a part of a committee to do some future planning in Malvern? And I said, oh, I'd love to. So I did that. And after that, I got a call from Jim McMonagle, and he said, you know, they'd like you to be on the board. And I said, really? He said, no, really. And I said, you know, I'm not being humble. I just didn't feel like I was worthy to do it. He said, no, they really want you on the board. So I come on the board. I'm there for a couple short years. And they said, we'd like you to be vice chairman. And I don't say no to Malvern because I love this place. And I said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Not thinking through what that really meant. Anyway, I served as chairman with an executive committee that was phenomenal. They made me look tremendous, and they were far brighter than I was. Each one of them brought something different to the table, and we had a really good run here helping build this place and keeping it the way it was. I've learned a couple things in my life. Some important positions I've ended up with are ones I never sought. And we talked as a board at Malvern, as an executive committee, that you don't run for chairman. It isn't something, it's not a political thing here at Malvern. It's something that people have to choose you for. I never intended to be on the board. I never intended to be chairman. It was something that I was asked to do. And I was blessed that I had that experience, because it was a wonderful experience. Can I take any questions about anything tonight? Go right ahead.
When you lost your son, um, how did you go about? I mean, was it your family and the background that you had that helped you maintain that faith? Because it tests you
Oh, it tested me big time.
big time, and it's like,
Huge.
how did you maintain that focus to stay dedicated?
And I've worked with a lot of fathers who have lost sons. It's kind of part of what my mission became. What I found was two things happen. Either this brings you closer to God as you lean on your faith, which I did, but I had a structure to lean on. Or if you don't have that structure, you're cursing our Lord. And that I saw, and I hated to see that, but I understood the pain, trust me. And it was all a result of the pain. But so I had a pretty good foundation, and Malvern is responsible for a lot of that foundation. I feel it was like the central pillar, seriously. You know, my parents were one part of the pillar, my teachers, nuns and priests were the other, but I really feel like the central pillar holding up my faith was Malvern. So I never once, if you can believe this, was upset at God. I wasn't. Although it wasn't what we would have ever liked, it turned out to be Frankie's time. And one of the messages I got, which was a few years later, I was happened to be watching EWTN, and I get this message, and I already knew Frankie was in heaven because I had gotten a ton of messages, amazing stuff. But I get this message that he's working with St. Michael, and I just smiled. I knew that God had a plan for him, and I know that I'll see him again someday if I behave myself, which I'm trying to do. But it's tough, and it's really hard when you encounter parents that you fully understand, by the way, that are just so upset at God, and you know their pain is not going to become any less. You know, I can tell you that when we lost Frank, we still couldn't believe it. Even though we went through the funeral, we couldn't believe it. And we both expected that summer for him to walk in the back door. We were in denial. So a friend of the family who worked in the funeral industry had put a grave marker at his site with his name and the date and so forth, but we could not bring ourselves to buy a headstone. And as a matter of fact, we had a special encounter with someone who propelled us to go get a headstone. And I said to my wife, I know what my son would like. She said, well, my parents bought the plot adjoining us and they'd like to get a mauve headstone. And I said, oh, no. I said, my son Frank would not want a mauve. I'm going to get him the biggest black headstone I can find. And sure enough, we met someone who was pretty special and had a connection with our Lord. And they said to us, oh, by the way, Frank has a message for you. He doesn't like that pink headstone. And that weekend, my wife says, we're going to get the headstone, which we did. And so my in-laws are right behind us, and they have a very nice headstone, but it's not the black one. We had a family that lost their son Teddy up our way. He was killed in an auto accident with a truck, and still unexplained. It was a beautiful day, sunny day. Nobody knows what happened, but we knew the family, and they asked us to come over because we had lost Frank. I guess it was a year earlier. And we went to see them to see if we could help them and talk to them. And they were already planning on getting a headstone, which I thought was truly amazing. And because we couldn't bring ourselves to do that. Yes. the question is, I still had children at home and they were hurting just like we were hurting. And as I said, my wife was hurting in a way that was different from mine. We both had extreme pain. That was a similarity, but our feelings were different because of our relationship. And we also had to be very cognizant of our children's feelings and how they were hurting, because they were hurting in a different way too. Frank was their oldest sibling, and he was the rock. He was the one who's going to take care of them. He was the one they could go to for advice. So that wasn't easy, but they were very supportive of us, and we were supportive of them, and we got through it. It wasn't easy. That summer we had a friend who had a house in Spring Lake, and they said, "Why don't you just come and take our house for a couple of weeks?" We couldn't even leave the house. We said, "Thank you so much, but we don't want to go anywhere." You know, that was the way we felt. You know, you want to flee. I really did. If Frank was an only child, I sincerely would have fled somewhere, because thinking at the time, well, if I go, God knows where, I'm gonna lose some of this pain. And there was a tragedy a couple of years ago up in Massachusetts where a mother who was postpartum depression had and was taken to a facility for help, and they released her. She was a nurse. She came home and she was in very bad shape. They should never have released her. Her husband ran out to get some fast food for a few minutes, and she harmed the kids. Let me just put it that way. It's the easiest way I can put it. She harmed the kids. And when that happened, after a very short period of time, he fled to Europe. He fled to Costa Rica. And I said, boy, I fully understand that. I understand how that can happen. But this place is so special. As I said, I came out here nervous, not remembering my prayers, never expecting to be here talking to you folks, knowing that my grandfather and father must be immensely proud because of my involvement here in Malvern. I do love this place. And when I was asked to speak tonight, I said, I don't say no to Malvern, and I won't say no to Malvern because I love this place. Thank you very much.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. Looking at the time here, it's 8:26. We have a half hour before the new man ceremony. So if you want to take a little break and come back with your the new men and also your sponsors, we'll get that started. It goes rather quickly, and then we can finish the night with benediction with Father Doug. Thank you.